You know, everybody says there's a Bad Boy Records curse. The P. Diddy curse is what they call it. And they say over 34 artists have left that label. Well, let me tell you something though, right? That Bad Boy era, won't nothing like it. Nothing like it. Gotta give it a puff, man, because they were running things. That machine was unstoppable, from the management, the producers, the hitmen, the artists they had. I mean, look, Death Row Records, they had an era. No Limit Records had an era. Rough Riders had an era. Rockefeller them had an era. Duck Down, Murder Inc., Wu-Tang, all had eras. But Bad Boy Records, man, they raised a lot of kids. That music influenced a lot of people. And Puff was the boss behind all of that. You gotta give him his flowers. And I know some people beg to differ, but it is what it is. He was running things, man. He bought you Craig Mack, Biggie, Total, Faith, Carl Thomas, 112, Mace, The Lox, Shine, Loon, G-Dep. The list goes on and on. Even Jodeci and Mary J. Blige. But one of my favorite over there, my favorite lyricists on that label was Black Rob. Black Rob and G-Dep, man, I always wanted them to do a joint album together. That would have been crazy. Or a Black Rob and a Biggie album would have been crazy. Them two telling stories. But you know, I'm talking BR, Bacardi Rob, Robbie O, like whoa. You know, they say Rob was a wild boy too, man. But he was nice on the mic. And one of the best hip hop storytellers in my opinion. Don't get it twisted either though. The music Rob put out might have been gangster, but he was a talented, smart guy too, because he said he had a degree in communications. And they say he was NBA level nice on the basketball court too. I would have never guessed that. Wow. But it just, you know, the way he went out was just so sad and tragic though, man. Plus he was too young. Too young. So let's try to get into this Black Rob story right now. Black Rob was born on June 8th, 1968 in Harlem, New York. And he actually said he grew up in Spanish Harlem around a lot of Hispanics. That was the area he was from, but he was cool with everybody out there. He said, ain't no black Harlem, ain't no Spanish Harlem. Harlem is just Harlem to him. Now, growing up, he had a rough life though. He had a rough life in the early part of his life. He said nobody in the family really cared for him because he was a wild boy. Because see, his father was never in his life and his mom was a real bad alcoholic. And her and Rob just never had that loving relationship when he was younger, but he still loved her. Plus, he said he didn't get along with his mom's boyfriend at the time, which caused him to end up leaving the house. And as far as his education goes and going to school, he said he dropped out, even though he got good grades and everything. He kept his grades up, he said, but he was just so poor that he didn't want to go to school because his clothes were so bad. And he was wearing the same things over and over from last summer because he couldn't afford the new stuff. And that led to him to start robbing people, committing robberies in the neighborhood, pickpocketing and snatching purses. He said he would even do 3-card money, basically anything just to get some money. But see, all of that just led to him going into the juvenile all the time, group homes, jail, and everything. Because see, at the time, he said he had a lot of love in his life, man. But you know, some of the family members showed him love though. He said like his female cousins, his aunt, uncles, everybody, you know, they took him in when he was going through it. But one thing he did love at that time was hip hop music. And he was influenced by artists like Dougie Fresh and Slick Rick, Grandmaster Cass, Fearless 4, Funky 4, Chirac, and all of them, and many more. Now, as he got older, he started rapping and freestyling, going by the name Bacardi Rob, because Bacardi was one of his favorite drinks. And he was in a rap group too called the Schizophrenics with his friends named Alto and Godzilla. Now, wanting to pursue a rap career, his friends didn't really take it that serious, so the group kind of fell apart. And that's when he just decided to just be a solo act. And then he changed his name to Robbio. But he was still in the streets getting in trouble and going back and forth to jail. He said he was locked up with rapper Tragedy Gaddafi too, who y'all probably know from the legendary Juice Crew and Capone and Noriega. He put them on. But when Rob said he got out of jail, he wanted to prove to everybody that he was going to be something in life, so he just kept focusing on music. And one day he was on the block rap battling somebody in the Bronx, and he ended up meeting a guy named RP who thought he was talented. And he told Rob that he knew Puff. He said he knew Puff Daddy because they went to school together at Howard University. Now, at that time, Bad Boy Records had just kind of formed. They didn't really have nothing going, but they had Craig Mack going though. Craig Mack was doing his thing. Craig Mack is the one that really got that bad boy machine going. Flavor in Your Ear, man, that's my junk still to this day. And then, look, Craig Mack dropped that Project Funk the World in 94. It was over. But anyway, look, now, Puff, even Puff said, out of all the songs he was part of, he never seen a song like Flavor in the Ear have people going so crazy. But Black Rob had a song too, just like that. But we'll get to that later. Now look, Rob did say, he also said that Biggie was there when he first got the Bad Boy, but Biggie didn't blow up yet. He was around, Rob said he was around when the Bad Boy Street Team was promoting the McDonald boxes with the Big and the Mac on them. That was a genius idea for marketing too. But anyway, right now, so he meets Diddy, he meets Puff at the time, and Diddy liked this flow after hearing him spit and signed him to the label. Now, Puff also changed his name to Black Rob, and he gave him a big check and basically just changed Rob's life just like that. Now, according to Black Rob in an interview, he said the deal he signed was for 10 albums for $450,000. Wow. That's a lot of money. Now, some might say that's not a good deal. 10 albums for almost $500,000 compared to what the label was going to make in the long run. But if you coming off the streets broke and homeless, that's a great deal. But anyway, look, now Puff, right? Now Puff would take him on the road doing tours, but he didn't take him everywhere because Rob was still on parole at the time. And Rob stayed in the studio writing songs, but he never got the chance to release an album during that time like Puff had promised him. Because the next thing you know, Biggie had got hot. Once Biggie got hot and released the album Ready to Die and sold millions, it was on and popping. Bad Boy Records was rolling. They had the East Coast on lock at that time. Then came the girl group Total. Then they went platinum. Then Faith Evans came and she went platinum. Then Puff signed the R&B group 112 after seeing them perform at the club in Atlanta called 112. That's where the name come from. And they started selling millions of records. But Puff made sure that Rob would get some shine because Rob hopped on a remix of the song Come See Me from 112. And Rob also did some songs with some other artists too, like the songs Nothing But and Recognize from the rap group called Crew. If y'all remember them, they was signed to Def Jam back in the day. And he was on the group Total's remix, What About Us? And his name was starting to buzz. His name was buzzing, and Rob was thinking he was next up to release his material. But then Puff ended up signing some more street rappers like Murder Mace and the Warlocks to the label. And he changed their names too to just Mace and the Locks. But then on March 9th, 1997, Biggie was murdered in LA. And Rob was hurt by that. Rob said when he first got the news about Biggie's death, he said he was in a hotel with some woman high off ecstasy for the first time when he got the news that Biggie had been killed. Wow. No, that was a crazy feeling. And look, Rob also stated that for some reason, him and Biggie was kept away from each other the whole time at Bad Boy for some reason. But when they saw each other, he said everything was cool and nothing but love, but Puff would kind of separate them, and that's something Rob say he wished he could have had just chilled with Biggie more when he was alive. Now that Biggie was dead, right, Rob thought for sure he was coming next to drop an album. But Puff told him he would have to wait because Biggie's death, it just had the whole label just messed up at the time. And Puff told Rob he didn't want to do rap music no more. He was just going to focus on R&B music. So Rob didn't know what to do after hearing that from Puff, because he said he was going to stop doing hip hop music. So look, after that, right, all of a sudden, Puff decides to go ahead with the solo album. Puff wanted to do a solo album, and Rob helped him do some writing on that album, and he was featured on the song I Love You Baby from the No Way Out album, which ended up selling over 7 million copies. And look, that was a smart move by Puff, because he had all this artists all over that album, which was great marketing and promotion for them. And you know what? Biggie was pushing Puffy to do an album anyway and become an artist. And Biggie was the one that gave Puff the nickname Diddy. He was already working on an album, I believe, because they had dropped the song Can't Nobody Hold Me Down, because Biggie was in the video. So Puff was already doing that album anyway, I think. Now, after the success of the Puff Daddy and the Family album, Rob was thinking he was next up. Then they skipped over Rob again. Now it was Mace's turn to drop. And Rob was featured on the song 24 Hours to Live with the Lox and DMX, which was one of my favorite joints off the Mace Harlem World album, which ended up selling over 5 million copies during that time. And Rob was really upset when Mace dropped too, because he thought he was next. Then the Lox came. The Lox released their debut album, Money, Power, Respect, which went certified platinum. But then here's when the curse starts to begin for Puff and the Bad Boy family. Here's the curse, right? First, Craig Mack left the label in 1997. Then Biggie was murdered in 1997. Then Mace decided to just leave the entertainment business and become a pastor in 1999. Then the Lox left and signed with the Rough Riders. Black Rob probably thought he was up again, but then Puff signs another street rapper, which was Shine. And then Puff released his second album, titled Forever, which was certified platinum. I don't even think Rob was even featured on that Forever album. Now by this time, Rob was fed up, man, because he been had his album done, and he told Puff, just let him out the contract. He go do his own thing. And that's when Puff started to put the focus on him, because really, Black Rob was the only street rapper left on the label besides Shine at that time. So now it was finally his turn. It was Rob's turn that the label wanted to focus on. And vice president of Bad Boy Records, Harv Pierre, had got a beat from producer Buck Wild that he wanted Rob to put a song to. Now, Rob said how the song Whoa came about. Whoa was a word he would always use when he see a girl with a big butt, or he see a nice car, or whatever, etc. Whatever he see. Anything you see that's ill, that's whoa. That's Rob's quote from the song. Now, when Rob finished the song, he said he really wasn't feeling it like that. He just did it for Harv Pierre to get off his back. And you know what's crazy about that beat? The Whoa beat? Lenny S., who worked for Rockefeller Records at the time, first gave that beat to Jay-Z, Memphis Bleek, and Emil, but they all passed on it. Wow. I also remember Kool G Rap saying he passed on that beat too. But anyway, when Bad Boy released the song Whoa, it became one of the biggest hits that year on the radio. And it hit triple platinum. That was my junk right there. And still to this day, I pump that junk. Woe used to tear the clubs up when it came on. And the video was dope too. They were standing on the big 18-wheeler truck. And Vibe magazine also named Woe the single of the year. And then he put the remix out. The Woe remix, Rod Digger was on there, Little C's, G Dep, The Brat, Beanie Siegel, Diddy, Sin, guy named Sin from the Hood Fellas, Petey Pablo, and the Mad Rapper was on it. And a lot of people don't know who. The Mad Rapper, that's D-Dot, y'all. He was dope too, D-Dot. And look, Rob also said that at that time, he wanted to sign Petey Pablo way before he blew up, but he just didn't have the business sense at the time to do it. But anyway, right now, the song Woe was catching fire, right? But then some more crazy stuff happened to the Bad Boy Camp, because on December 27th, 1999, Sean, Puff, and Jennifer Lopez were at a club called Club New York and ended up getting into a shootout which left 3 people injured. And look, right? Black Rob said he was there that night, right by the bar when it happened, chilling with Fredro Starr from the rap group Onyx. And Rob said when the song Woe came on, that's when the club went wild and everybody got crazy that night, right? And he also said the guys that Sean was shooting at that night really had beef with Puff that night, because they had came up to Rob and told him, because Rob and Sean, they knew the guys. But you know the rest of the story. Sean ended up being charged with attempted murder, assault, and reckless endangerment. So now Rob was thinking that this incident was going to put a hold on his album release, but it didn't, because on March 7th, 2000, he finally released his debut album titled Life Story, which hit number 3 on the Billboard 200, selling over 170,000 copies in the first week, and ended up going certified platinum. And it saved Bad Boy at that time. It saved Bad Boy Records and put them back in the game. That album, Life Story, crazy. It got 4.5 mics from the source too. He had some dope songs on there. Can I Live with the Locks. I used to love the Spanish Fly with Jennifer Lopez. The intro song, Life Story, with Cheryl Pepsi Riley on there. Man, go back and listen to the album again when y'all get a chance. I used to also like the song called I Dare You, featuring Joe Hooker. I remember that song being on the Slam soundtrack. Y'all remember that movie Slam? Yeah, that was a dope movie too. A lot of people don't know also, right? Joe Hooker, that's Harve Pierre. And look, that beat, right? I Dare You beat, Rob said that beat was given to him by Big Pun. Wow. And I think D-Dot executive produced that whole album too. Now look, right? Another artist that was featured on that album was G Dep, who Black Rob was planning on signing to his own label he was trying to start up. Because see, him and G Dep go way back from the hood. And the plan was for Black Rob, once he gets situated and the paperwork right, he was going to put G Dep on. But Puff went behind his back and signed him himself after he introduced him to him. Wow, that's messed up. And Rob said he was mad at G Dep and Puff for doing that, but he eventually just looked at it like, well, at least G Dep is over here with us at the time, so he let it go. Now with a successful album, you would think that everything was all good and he was making money, touring and doing his thing. But they say Rob was going through the money, man, blowing it. Rob was a wild boy, because see, now another thing, right? Black Rob money was going through child support too. Child support was tearing him up too. And look, months later, in May, right after he dropped his debut album, Life Story, he was arrested. Rob was arrested on gun possession and drug charges when cops pulled him over in his car. And he was signing autographs for fans, and the undercover narcotics officers saw him passing a handgun to his passenger. They also discovered several tablets of what was suspected to be ecstasy during the search of the car. Now, in 2001, G. Dep released his debut album titled Child of the Ghetto, and Rob was featured on the song called Let's Get It with Diddy, which was all over the radio during that time. And that same year, Diddy released his third album titled The Saga Continues, and Rob was featured on the song Bad Boys for Life with Mark Curry and Diddy, which was a big hit also. In 2004, after just finishing a 6-month prison bid for failure to pay child support, Rob was arrested again and charged with grand larceny. He was booked for burglary and criminal possession of stolen property. Now the story behind that charge, right, they say around 11:45 a.m., Rob was seen on camera going into a hotel room and stealing jewelry from that room. And the victim said she was sleeping when the heist took place, but woke up to find $6,000 in jewelry and $300 in cash missing. And the hotel security camera also caught Rob checking doors on that hotel's 12th floor earlier that day around 4 a.m. in the morning. And he was seen going into her room and leaving with a pocketbook. And when police arrested him, he didn't have the jewelry in his possession at the time of the arrest, but they said he was convinced by police to call his peoples and had them bring the stolen goods to the station. And he pleaded guilty that November to criminal possession of stolen property, a felony, and he was sentenced to 2 to 6 years in prison. Now, Rob said in an interview with Comeback Jack that he stole the jewelry because he was fed up because Bad Boy Records wasn't giving him his money. But he remained free on bail, but he didn't show up as arranged months later, and that's when a bench warrant was issued for his arrest because he went on the run. While on the run, he ended up releasing his second album titled The Black Rob Report on October 18th, 2005, in which I thought was a dope album. That was a dope album. I love the song called Ready. That was my junk. And that album did debut at number 7 on Billboard's Top Rap Albums chart. But overall, the album really didn't make any noise in the sales department because Rob really couldn't promote it because he was on a run for jumping bail. And look, right, Rob had done a song called Live from the East Side that he had wanted on this album, The Black Rob Report. He wanted that song Live from the East Side on the album, and it was produced by Heavy D. But Heavy D ended up giving that beat to Beanie Siegel, which became Feel It in the Air. Wow. I heard that song too. That junk is dope. Black Rob had that Feeling in the Air beat first, y'all. It's on YouTube if y'all want to check it out. It was on a DJ K Slate mixtape or something. Now, in 2006, the law caught up with Rob and they found him after the federal task force caught him in an undisclosed location in New Jersey. And he went to court and the judge sentenced him to do over 7 years in prison. Now in prison, right, Rob ended up getting sick because he had bad kidneys from all the drinking and the bad eating habits and popping E-pills all the time. Look, Rob said he used to drink Hennessy and Alizé just about every day. Wow. But he got sick while he was incarcerated, and he thought he still had health insurance because he had it the whole time once he signed with Bad Boy. And look, and when he got sick at the prison, they told him he didn't have health coverage. So when Rob and his lawyer called Bad Boy Records and asked what happened to the health insurance, they told Rob they took him off it. Wow. They took him off the health insurance. Plus, they removed him from the Bad Boy Records website and took all of his music and albums offline and out of the stores. He said not one person from the Bad Boy staff reached out to him while he was in prison or came to see him. And the crazy part is, Puff, Rob said Puff came to that same prison where he was at, but he didn't come to see Rob. He went to visit Lil Wayne. Wow, that's crazy. Now, after that, right, Rob was released from prison in May 2010 after serving 4 years of a 7-year sentence for that grand larceny charge. Now, Rob said he would have only did like 2 years in prison if his money was right for his lawyers, but he said he wasn't bitter anymore, and he thanked Bad Boy Records for the opportunity they gave him and for changing his life. That's one thing about Rob. He never blamed nobody. He said he was wilding. He admitted he was wilding. But another thing that Rob didn't like was Puff saying Rick Ross was the new Biggie at that time. And Rob made it clear that Ross could never be compared to Biggie because he's been in the studio with Biggie, and he says for a fact Biggie don't write. He goes right off the top of his head creating songs. Wow. That always been a debate too, man, about Biggie, because they say he never wrote his rhymes in the studio or whatever. But anyway, right, so Black Rob left Bad Boy Records and he ended up signing with Duck Down Records because they were still doing hip-hop over there. It was all about lyrics. And he released his 4th album titled Game Tested, Streets Approved. I mean, it did hit number 44 on the Billboard top R&B hip-hop albums, but overall, it wasn't successful like the first album, Life Story. Now, in 2015, he ended up having a stroke. Rob ended up suffering a stroke from having high blood pressure. He said the day he had the stroke, he was sleeping, and when he woke up, he just felt weird. And his baby mama noticed his face was all twisted. And that's when they rushed him to the hospital in the middle of the night. Rob also stated that after he had that stroke, he had to rememorize all his lyrics over. And it took him like a whole year to memorize everything he had. But, years later, he bounced back. That year went by, he bounced back and released his 4th studio album titled Genuine Article on Slim Style Records. And he was also focusing on a reality show called Comeback Kings that was going to be on BET, starring Ed Lover, Tretch was in it, Mr. Cheeks, Jermaine Hopkins, y'all probably know as Steel from Juice. Talent was on there, some other celebrities. Now, in 2021, things kind of got real bad for Black Rob, health-wise, because he stopped going to the dialysis center to get his treatment. He was supposed to get treatment 3 times a week because, he hooked up with a guy named Cal Dawson who was booking him shows trying to help put some money in his pocket. And he started managing Rob. So when Rob was in Atlanta, he was staying in a hotel, and by him not doing his dialysis treatment, Rob ended up getting sick to the point his body was swelling up. And that's when some of his friends, a guy named Goldmouth and Cricket, they had took him to the hospital. They say Goldmouth and Cricket really looked out for Rob with a place to stay and everything during that time. They kind of took care of Rob during that time. And when Rob got out of the hospital, he was waiting to see if he can get into the dialysis center, but he ended up getting sick again. Now, on April 9th, 2021, the day rapper DMX died, DJ Self had posted a video on his Instagram of Rob showing love to DMX in that video. And Rob said he was in a lot of pain and stuff. And then days later, DJ Self uploaded another video of Black Rob talking about his health, saying he's been struggling on dialysis since he had 4 strokes. And he's been dealing with it for about 5 years. And he also said he was homeless. Rob said he was homeless and he doesn't have a house to live in. And his side was killing him. He had some pain on his side that was killing him. And that's when a music producer named Mike Zombie and Bad Boy former artist Mark Curry put together a fundraiser GoFundMe page to help Rob with finding him a home and paying his medical bills, right? And then Puff reached out and paid for his hotel room for 2 weeks. But, Rob's friends at that time wanted to see if Puff could get him like an apartment or something and some transportation back and forth to the dialysis center. So Jay-Z reached out. Jay-Z had reached out and donated like $20,000. Now after that, Mark Curry went to see him and found him on the floor because Rob said he couldn't move his legs. He found Rob on the floor. So they tried to take Rob to the hospital, but they say Rob refused to go. So they ended up taking him to a juice bar, and that's when Rob just ended up collapsing. Wow, that's crazy. And they rushed him to the hospital, and on April 17th, 2021, Black Rob died, man, from cardiac arrest due to kidney failure. That's crazy, man. Now, Diddy did pay for his funeral. Diddy did pay for his funeral, but he didn't show up to the funeral. He wasn't there, but he did pay for the funeral. And that's when Black Rob's manager at the time, who was helping him out with shows, named Cal Dawson, called Diddy out. And he said Diddy should have came sooner, should have helped sooner. Now Black Rob's dead. Man, that's crazy, man. And you know, it was a whole bunch of crazy stuff going on when Rob died, man. It was all about money missing, stealing money. People was blaming people for this and that, homelessness, and it was crazy. I seen Mark Curry and Gene Deal do some interviews about the whole situation. Y'all can check out on YouTube. I know Mark Curry and Gene Deal, they was there. They was there when Black Rob was at Bad Boy. So, you know, listen to their interviews. They got some stories. And, you know, some of Rob's friends was doing interviews, like Big Rob. Jojo Capone was talking about his life and what happened. They had some good stories on Rob. You know, Black Rob's female cousin, Crystal, had a lot to say about how people was not helping Rob. Y'all can check that interview out on YouTube. She was going off on some people. But you know, this is just a sad story, man. The way Black Rob went out. Crazy, man. Terrible. They say he was also working on a book. And somebody was working on a documentary about his life before he passed and everything. So, you know, so hopefully the truth come out later on about his life and everything. And I know Rob got a lot of unreleased music too. The world needs to hear that. Rob got a lot of unreleased music, I bet. Because I remember him saying he did something with Michael Jackson, and plus he had a whole bunch of artists and groups he was trying to put on, like Alumni with Porter Rock, Gotham City he was dealing with. And I think he had his own label too, called Boxing One Records with his manager, Jamal Mosley. I also remember him saying he was supposed to be working on Life Story Part 2. And he had another album called Permanent Scars. Like I said, he got a lot of music, man. I wonder what's going to happen to all that music if it would ever be released. Rob put a lot of work in, so hopefully some of the music will come out for the fans, man. It's just crazy, man, the way he died. You know, because look, DMX died first, then Black Rob, and then Shock G died. That's crazy, man. Rob was 52 years old. He was young, man. He was 52 years old. Rest in peace, Black Rob.